looking forward to the millennials really making a difference not only in this midterm election, but certainly in 2020.
You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back.
Folks, welcome to Get Woke, God Vote. I'm Roland Martin, host of Roland Martin Unfiltered. We're having, of course, great conversations, trying to get you focused on not only voting, but also the importance of public policy. There are very few people today who are as unfiltered as I am, and I think my next guest certainly can qualify for that. She is the thorn in the side of Agent Orange, and of course, she also has attracted this huge following. They now call her Auntie Maxine. We know, of course, is Congresswoman Maxine Waters from Los Angeles. Congresswoman, good to see you.
Delighted to be here with you, and I'm so happy to hear about this program you're doing.
Who would knew an 80-plus-year-old black woman would have these millennials all hyped and giving them a run for their money?
Well, you know, I am just so honored that young people have decided that they like what I say and the way that I handle my politics. I just try and talk straight, talk plain, tell it like it is, and confront those who think they're so powerful that they can intimidate. And so I don't take it, and I don't try in any way to send any signals that maybe you should be very nice and calm and not upset anybody. I just do what my heart tells me to do, and the kids like it. And for some reason, they have not seen this in their lifetimes.
I think what it is authenticity. Somebody who is going to say it just like it is, unapologetic, unfiltered, and they're saying, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, you know, the niceties and let me go ahead and spin it. No, I want somebody who's going to give it to me straight and say the way it needs to be said.
Well, I think so, and you know this better than anybody else. Those who will speak our mind, we're going to be criticized, we're going to be attacked, but that really doesn't bother us. I mean, we've been through this, and we're going to continue to go through it. And I'm just pleased that we've been able to send a signal to young people that we care about these issues so very much. We're not going to play politics with them. We're not going to try and hide whomever we are behind the kind of language that they don't understand. And so because of that, this authenticity that you're talking about is helping us to realize a whole new era and a whole new time of possibilities for young people to participate.
I think it's also important to let them know that you got to fight. I think people have allowed other folks to lie, to make stuff up, and never call them out on it. Don't come with the fact check tomorrow, correct the lie. My philosophy is that they're sitting at home going, well, that must be true, and then folks begin to believe the lie, and that thing begin to take off.
Well, you know, they either believe the lie or they think all of us are just dishonest. And not only will we sit and allow someone to lie and not challenge them, then you're right, something's wrong with us. And so I think that the millennials are now beginning to understand that there's a difference with elected officials and how they handle public policy, and there's a difference between those who just want a title and want some perks and a little upward mobility, and those who are saying, hey, this is who I am, like me or not, I'm gonna tell it like it is, and if that means I don't win my election, then so be it.
But the reality is, when you in a street fight, I remember Reverend Willie Wilson. He spoke at my church in Dallas, and some thugs stole the church equipment, stole the drums and stole the microphones and everything. And so Willie went into the pulpit. He said, "I need my Christian thugs." He said, I don't need all y'all who just want to just pray with folks. He said, I need the folk who used to be in the streets who now love Jesus to go get back our equipment. And so several brothers volunteered, and they got the equipment back in 48 hours.
Wow.
And he was like, he said, see, sometimes you got to have some folks who say, no, we'll handle this. You got to have folks who are willing to go toe-to-toe and say, I'm not gonna back down from you.
I told someone the other day who is trying to say that we're violent when we protest. Protest is about making you feel uncomfortable. I'm not supposed to come to you and say, may I protest you? Right. No. Absolutely not. If your heart tells you that this is what you need to do because you see some injustice, that you see people who are creating, a terrible time and pain for others, and you want to protest to try and make change, to try and make it right, then speak what your heart is telling you to do. It is because of protests that we have been able to make America better. We're the patriots who say we believe in this country and we believe that it can be about justice and equality for everybody. And we can't back up from that.
Right.
We can't allow anybody to intimidate us and call us violent and talk about somehow we are approaching the establishment in a terrible way. We can't allow them to take away our right to protest. And so I think the young people see that. They understand that many of them, have gone through life, graduated from college. They've been taught by their parents, now you be nice, and if you get that job, I want you to dress right. I want you to speak the King's English the way it's supposed to be spoken. I don't want you to cause any trouble, and maybe you'll get a promotion. And so they have done this, and many of them have graduated. They can't find the jobs comparable to their education. They're being discriminated against on the job. They're confronted with racism on the job, and they're still trying to abide by what their mothers and their fathers and their grandmothers told them to do. And they have gotten angry, and they've gotten tired of that. And they don't believe in any of us because what they have been taught has not worked for them. It's not fair. And so when they see change and they see those who are willing to speak truth to power and to confront, racism, etc., I think it is allowing them to become themselves and to think the thoughts and talk about them in a very vocal way, in ways that they had not done before. And so I'm pleased about that, and I'm looking forward to the millennials really making a difference not only in this midterm election, but certainly in 2020. Many folks in our community, and particularly, older folk, they were so thrilled and happy to see a black man become the president of the United States of America. They thought they would never ever see that in their lifetime. And for them, everything that they had fought for, everything they had worked for, now could be realized in this individual. And they were so proud of him. I got that. Mm-hmm. I got that. And I know that people were willing to put aside any thoughts that they may have that they thought perhaps he was not absolutely correct in what he was doing. Maybe they thought maybe he wasn't doing enough, but they were willing to put that aside if they had those kind of thoughts. And so that's okay, I get that. And I understand that kind of pride in the fact that this black man was the president of the United States. But for those of us who were fortunate enough to be socialized and reared in such a way that we were allowed to be ourselves, and we, felt pretty confident that we had a right to be treated fairly, to get the kind of resources that many others were getting from government, particularly as related to the big energy program that was going on at that time. We knew that we had to do what we had to do. And so the Financial Services Committee, as you know, at that time, for the first time, had the largest number of African Americans that ever served on that committee.
I think it was like 10.
And so we used our power. Barney Frank was the chair at that time. Mm-hmm. So we would not come out of the back room with the fight. So Barney Frank went and begged a Republican, please, I'll owe you one. I'll do whatever, but please, let's get this over with because they're not coming out. They're not going to come back and participate. So he was able to swing one vote, and then we came out. That gave us the majority, and we were able to get the program that basically put resources into communities to rehab those houses that had been boarded up because of the 2008 recession that had been caused by Wall Street as they came out with those exotic products, getting people to sign on the dotted line for mortgages they really could not afford. And so that's but one instance of the kind of work you have to do sometime to go against even those who you share the same party with.
I want you to explain that because when folks are out here saying, look, I'm not trying to vote because I don't see with them Black Caucus people, they ain't doing nothing. They're not accomplishing anything. The reality is, as somebody who has covered City Hall, who's covered county government, who's covered in multiple cities, also what happens in Congress, there are things that you do, the things that you are able to affect that most people will never ever see, never ever hear about. Literally, it could be the removal of a sentence in a bill that could alter it in a way. It's stuff like that that happens that's hard to articulate to people when they say, well, I'm not wasting my time voting for her or voting for him because I just don't see what they've accomplished for our community.
Well, you know, it's very difficult to really educate the public on, you know, how Congress really works and how legislation is developed. You will see a piece of legislation with a couple of names on it as co-authors, but that legislation has gone through a process where there may be 50 or 60 amendments on it. And when it comes across you and your committee, and you have some ideas about how you can make that legislation better, how you can keep it from being harmful to the people you represent, you put together that amendment and you fight hard to get that amendment inside that bill, and oftentimes you do. But, you know, in financial services, my committee, for example, I know that we are not covered adequately. I know that there are a few newspapers, for example, that focus on financial services issues, who may write something about it, but the average media does not get it.
Yep.
And our newspapers at home don't get it, because we're talking about everything from derivatives, you know, to the Volcker rule, and that's not sexy. And people don't get that. But you know, when you have something like the Volcker rule, what you're talking about is keeping these banks from taking the money that's deposited in them by the average worker and going out and gambling with it and trading, you know, as these big banks do. You are working oftentimes on issues that deal with, you know, Wells Fargo, for example, to stop them from taking out accounts in individuals' names that don't even know that they're creating these accounts, where they're trying to make their bank look as if it's growing so that they'll get a lot more investments in it. So whether we're talking about dealing with the fraud that's perpetrated on the average person by some of the biggest banks and financial institutions in this country, or we're talking about the fiduciary rule that will stop, you know, investment advisors from taking advantage of the average person who wants to get some advice on their investments, and instead of them directing them what's in their best interest, they're only looking for what's in their best interest and how much money they're going to make if they get you to invest in a certain product. That's not written about, and it's not going to be written about, but we just have to do the work that needs to be done to protect people that need to be protected. And so you're absolutely right. The legislative process is complicated and it's very difficult. The Black Caucus does a lot of work in every committee that we serve on, whether it is, you know, my Financial Services Committee, or whether it's Benny Thompson with Homeland Security, or whether it is, you know, Cummings sitting on the Oversight Committee. We are constantly in battle trying to, you know, formulate legislation that will not harm not only our communities, but many other communities. We are on the case, and we know that we get criticized because all people see oftentimes is what the media will let them see. You know, they might come to me, you know, and they want me to talk about slavery. And I said, no, I'm not talking about that today. I'm talking about the banks.
Right.
And I'm talking about Wall Street. Well, they don't want to hear that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so you get defined based on what the media will allow you to say and do in the way that they present you. So thank God for Black media. Thank God for these little newspapers that are in our communities, because we do get a chance to at least talk about some of these issues.
You recall the first election you voted in?
No, but I voted when I turned 18, yes.
What did that feel like? But also, was that something that was ingrained in you? So like, now when you turn 18, you know you're voting. Because there are a lot of people who are growing up, and that's just not a part of their family life. That's just not what they do.
Well, you know, it was interesting the way local politics worked back in the day when I was coming up. You had a local committee person who was responsible for a certain area. And I came from a huge family. I have 12 brothers and sisters, and we had very little, but your local committee person was the one that you went to say, look, we need some coal in this house, you know, because we had burning, you know, coals that burned actual lumps of coal. And so they would help you to get coal delivered to your house. If it was in summertime, it might be ice, or it may be other things that they helped, you know, poor people with, the average family with. And so that's how I saw politics. Politics is about, you know, people who are in the political arena helping folks. Now, that was a very, very, you know, limited way, but it was about helping folks. And so I've always seen politics as a way by which you could help the least of these. And then, of course, I really believed in the Constitution that was taught to us. I really believed in the 3 branches of government. I thought it was exciting when I was in school, you know, learning about how government was supposed to work. And then in our school, we had, you know, different clubs, the Human Relations Club, and this club and that club. And so I basically had the opportunity, you know, to be around people and family that in their own way was involved in politics and government. And so I was kind of reared on all of that, and I looked forward to voting, and I liked the idea of the debates and, you know, people talking about, you know, what they care about, that kind of thing. My mother talked politics a lot. She was very limited, she was uneducated, and I can recall when I disagreed with her, when she said she was gonna vote for Eisenhower, because he brought our boys home. That's what they used to say, you know, they brought our boys home from the war. So she was gonna, but he was a Republican. And I thought, you can't do that. But she really believed that that's why he should be voted for. So I had the opportunity to engage at a very young age, not only with my mother, but kind of others around us who would sit around and talk politics. And they talked it in their own language, in their own way, but you know, you got a chance to listen, and I was interested. And I patterned myself after some of them, yeah.
So how does it make you feel when you encounter somebody who says, this is a waste of my time? This means nothing. It is not gonna change anything.
Well, I have to tell you, it's very hurtful. I can recall walking precincts, and I do still walk precincts and knock on doors, you know, not only for myself, but in different campaigns that I'm working in. And I can recall knocking on a door in the city of Inglewood, which is now part of my district. And the young lady who answered the door was unkind, and she says, I don't vote. Don't bother me. I don't want to be bothered with that. And I can remember how hurt I felt, thinking about what we do and, you know, how we're in a constant struggle to provide for, you know, to work in the best interests of people. Now, here's what I finally discovered. In talking with her and some others, you know, after that, they don't see the connection between, you know, clean water and what you do. They don't see the connection between what you do and what we're doing now, even about climate change.
Right.
They don't see the connection between welfare even. You know, even though welfare has changed an awful lot, they don't know that somebody makes that happen. You know, as a matter of fact, I remember one lady said, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. No, that is not the way it's supposed to be. That is the way people make it because they work for it, whatever it is. But much of what goes on, when we talk about safety and security and all of that, and why cars, you know, are not killing us with the emissions that are coming from, you know, automobiles, they don't oftentimes know that's because people fought to make sure the air was cleaner and that these emissions were not coming out of, you know, the back of these cars and causing us harm. They just don't know that, and we still have not found a way to talk to the masses long enough and in a way that we can help them to understand what we do. We have lots of television,
Right.
but it is wasted.
Lots of information, but
Nothingness, basically. But education, for the most part, does not come from the greatest media that we have, you know.
You thought about retirement?
Of course not. I'm going to be here until I'm 100 years old.
So here's the last thing. You run into a young person, you run into somebody middle age, you run into somebody who's older, that woman who you knocked on that door, I'm not voting. So all you got is 30 seconds. They may be trying to grab you while you're trying to board a plane. So if you got 30 seconds to tell somebody why they must vote, what do you tell them? Go.
There are a lot of folks out here who don't want you to vote. And they're doing everything to keep you from voting because they don't want you to have power. They don't want you to have the money. They don't want you to have the resources to have a decent quality of life. And those are some of the people who are living in the best styles with the most money in this country. So if you don't want to have them continue to tell you what you can have, you better get out here and vote.
That was 22 seconds. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I have so many people who I see in the street who say to me, Miss Waters, I got your back. The only way you can have my back is to get registered and vote, vote, vote.
You have to develop a conscience in which you know that voting and participating is a part of the price you pay for the gift of life that you have received from the universe. That's part of the gift.
You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back.
Folks, welcome to BeWoke.vote. I'm your host, Roland Martin, also the host of Roland Martin Unfiltered. When we think about some of the greatest organizers in teachers, when we think about the Black freedom movement, some call the Civil Rights movement, we often hear the names like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We hear, of course, Roy Wilkins. We might hear about Fannie Lou Hamer. But I've always said two of the most unsung heroes, Ella Baker, one of the greatest organizers that we have ever seen, and also my next guest, Reverend James Lawson. He joins us right now. Glad to have him here.
Thank you. Good to be here. Glad to see you.
So I was having a conversation. We were talking about young folks and voting and how do we keep people mobilized. And I said the most underappreciated aspect of the Black freedom movement was the fact that y'all taught folks, that was teaching, that was training. You didn't just wake up, go to a rally.
No, that's right.
You taught folks first.
Yes, sir. We help people to interpret their history, not so much from the perspective of the conventional wisdom, but from the point of view of equality, justice, freedom, that they were human beings. They had the greatest gift of life, and that they had to cultivate that gift in every respect, heart, soul, mind, strength, and to act together. So we mobilized many people, and of course, a significant part of that was the fact that as a human being, you can stay awake, you can be alive, you can love, you can serve, you can dissolve injustice in yourself and outside yourself, and you can keep at it with your neighbors and with other people. So that movement was the greatest movement America had from 1775, I'm going to say, to 1955 and beyond, was the greatest movement in modern times.
Other people call it the Civil Rights Movement. They might call it the Black Freedom Movement. But you invoke Rosa Parks in it.
Yes, I call the main energy of that period the Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr. Nonviolent Movement of America. Or I call it the Rosa Parks Martin King Campaign for Equality and Justice, rather than calling it the Civil Rights Movement.
Why?
Because in a society of male domination and chauvinism, in a society where there's been for 400 years so much sexism and racism, so much economic cruelty and oppression, the conventional perspective of history excludes too much of the history of cruelty. James Baldwin spoke about the bloody catalog of our history. That bloody catalog is more influential today in many, many people than any other facet of American history. And it's blind, It is invisible, it's unseen, and therefore many people yield to it. The 53 million white women who voted for Trump in the last presidential election were yielding to those dark forces that are invisible, but are visible if we want to make them visible. And so our movement sought to make those forces visible so that we could see them, and then we could dissolve them. We could fight back, we could resist, we could create an alternative vision of what we can become.
I've had people tell me, dude, why do you keep focusing on the teaching and the training? And when I see what Reverend Dr. William Barber is doing, every time he and I talk, he said, we're not having rallies, we're having trainings. We're having workshops. He said, we're teaching people because people don't quite understand what is required to actually create lasting change.
In many cases, people growing up in the United States, birthed and raised here, do not understand that in the first instance, the gift of life is the greatest gift that we have. It is given to us. That's what the Declaration of Independence says. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, that all are endowed with the unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, that's never taught. That's not in the conventional conversations that people engaged in around the country. In an election year like this year of 2018, it's nowhere in the conversation. So people don't know that that's the heart and foundation of how this country came to be. In that sense, we were very, very unique as a people. At first, I was a full-time organizer in the emerging nonviolent movement, teaching people the philosophy and the theory and the tactic of nonviolence, to fight back with dignity, to fight back with courage, to fight back with compassion. Do not allow the hostility to make you sick as a human being, but allow the hostility to be used that you conquer it and can live through it and work through it and become yourself a stronger person than you ever imagined possible. In a way, this is what we're asking people to do in this election. You have to develop a conscience in which you know that voting and participating in resisting the wrong in your society is a part of the price you pay for the gift of life that you have received from the universe. That's part of the gift. And so you have to deal with that.
We're trying to get folks not just to vote.
Right, that's right.
But to get them to understand that voting is the end of one process, then after the election is the beginning of another process.
Voting is but one tactic that comes ever so often. In between, we have to be people deeply engaged in being informed about what our situation is, what the situation of our neighbors is, be concerned for racism, for economic injustice, for working families. So if we stay informed in a daily way, in our own neighborhood, in our own family, and around the community, then the voting becomes a major step that we're more than eager to go ahead and do. To be an engaged human being, not a distracted human being, but a human being who is what the Buddhists called mindful, to have mindfulness of where you are and what's going on around you. This is one of our major problems. We have a Congress that almost is unaware of the plight of 325 million people in this country. They do not know us. When the Me Too movement explodes, those 11 senators in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate and Congress, they hadn't the slightest idea what this was about. If they knew their country, they would know second-class citizenship for women and using women as objects for sex has been a long time form of oppression in this country and elsewhere. They would have known of the rape of Indian women, of the rape of slave women. They would know that this was a part of the instrumentality of cruelty that our own country practiced in various ways. They would have known behind the scenes the Dr. Ford's story is but one story of millions and millions of people all across our country.
When you saw the women who were on Capitol Hill, and when you saw the folks who were banging on the door of the Supreme Court, and then Mitch McConnell says, oh, these angry mobs and these paid protesters, and they wanted to harm us, and this is uncivil. How would you respond to Mitch McConnell?
Well, Mitch McConnell is one of the most crude, cruel men we have ever had a political figure in this nation and as a majority leader. That's number one. Number two is that what the media calls the protest was all right, I suppose. But from my perspective as a strategist of direct action, it was a mistake.
How?
Number one, anyone who knows anything about the last 50 years in the United States knows what Judge Kavanaugh represents. Mm-hmm. He represents sexism. He does. He represents racism. He represents that whole strain of people who decided that the Supreme Court is too activist. It has to go back and interpret the Constitution as in 1896. It has to continue to be a Supreme Court that sees the Constitution but doesn't see all the people in the country. That's what he represents, and that's what other people on that Supreme Court today represent. That's a part of the movement of the so-called conservatism, which is not conservatism in the classical sense at all, but is the group that wants to preserve American society as a male-dominated, largely white male chauvinistic society with economic injustice extending to millions and millions of people.
When you said as a strategist, you thought they made a mistake.
Yes, because number one, it should have been an inclusive movement. The picture should not have been primarily of women. Black people should have been mobilized in that effort. They should not have worked by themselves. They should have worked with black community groups. They should have worked with Hispanic community groups. They should have worked with male groups. They should have worked with GLBT groups. It was a diverse, multi-ethnic, heavily mixed gender protest campaign. And because that is the way that campaigns in the 21st century must be. They must represent all the voices in this country who are seeking equality and liberty for all.
So what do you tell somebody today? What do you tell a young person who's watching, that person who was in their 20s or 30s, who says, okay, Reverend Lawson, that's great, I hear you, but everything you're talking about, that can't be used today. That won't work today. This is a whole different world. Everything that you've done, I appreciate it, but it can't work in the 21st century.
First of all, such a young person represents the United States of America and its conventional culture. That's what I've heard all my life, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, and today. But they better begin to recognize that you cannot overcome the forces of Trumpism by imitating Trumpism in language or in behavior or in vision. You cannot do eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth with Trump and expect you're going to get rid of him. The forces of wickedness that Trump produced are now on the rise in Europe as well as in the United States. Mm-hmm. So we should not be surprised if Trump is maybe only the first president of this caliber, of this kind of meanness, of this kind of power hungriness. It could happen, and I do not see national political voices who recognize the simple fact. Trump can only be defeated by a vision and a movement that does not act like Trump, but acts like people who know that they are alive and that love and truth are the ways that we best exemplify our humanity and the gift of life. So there's no difference about that. And this is what greatly troubles me. I recognize that the voices that will allow the people of the USA not to lose our struggle for truth and beauty are not there at this moment.
If there is a group that's assembled, and that group is Pastor Robert Jeffress, Jerry Falwell Jr., Franklin Graham, Paula White, Tony Perkins, Ralph Reed.
Yes, Ralph Reed especially.
All these white conservative evangelicals who say they all love Jesus.
No, they don't. They don't know what that means.
If that group is assembled
Yeah.
and you are standing before them, what do you tell them?
Well, my own idea is that it would be better for me to show them than to tell them.
Show them what?
In the 50s, Jerry Falwell, that you mentioned, Pat Robinson, Perkins, Jim Dobson, those are all people of my generation. Mm-hmm. They were all thoroughgoing, in public ways and in private ways, racist, who said segregation forever, who said Jim Crow laws are the way that we have to live. Jerry Falwell preached this on his old-fashioned revival hour broadcast on Sunday night. That was a national broadcast. Our movement out of the 50s, 55, 59, 60, made them change their story, made them stop preaching and teaching racism. We did it not by talking to them, but through the sit-in campaign, the bus campaign. Bus campaigns around the Southeast, including Lynchburg, Virginia, in which the signs came down. So that stopped them. Now, one of my friends who was a gay man from way, way back, and the theologian and evangelical, Mel White, started in that same period to tell these people that they had to stop preaching racism. They started preaching then against gay and lesbian people. Now you can see that in their broadcasts, in their sermons, in their books. So they were people who did not have the self-esteem that came up out of their very souls, out of their beings, out of their bones. They had the self-esteem that said, I'm superior than you are. I'm a man, and therefore, woman, you're submissive. So they have to have a religious teaching that gave them superiority over some other people.
Right.
So that's where the whole push against gay people and lesbian people began to pick up on the radio and in television broadcast shows. That in itself reveals how weak their religion was. Their religion was not rooted in Jesus or Moses at all, but rooted in USA culture of male chauvinism and domination of some group of people over other people. So we showed them in the movement that they had to stop. And while this hasn't yet happened in terms of gay lesbian issues, and that's a much smaller issue in terms of the numbers of people who are involved, and it's a more diverse, complicated issue because it means that we human beings have to realign our understanding of human sexuality, which many of us are not willing to do. It means, in the Christian world, it means stop saying that sexuality represents how original sin is passed from parents to babies. That's stupidity that came out of the 4th century. So a whole society has to change its understanding and see human sexuality as a good gift of creation, a good gift of life that can be appropriated for the advancement of life and for the achieving human potential. So it's more complicated in that sense. But the point I want to make is that two things. One, yes, every form of discrimination against people, whether it's for complexion or creed or politics or whatever, it doesn't matter. every form of injustice that deprives people and babies of access must be abolished. That's the task. So it's much greater than even, our work in the United States. And the second thing then that I want to emphasize is that these enemies of human life, in many ways, they cannot be talked to very well. They have to be shown by a struggle that allows them to recognize that they're up against a soul force that they cannot smother, that they cannot stop, and that ultimately will demand that the systems of domination will change. And a part of that is what's going on today, to the great dismay of too many people. So the King movement of 1955 is the first time in a very violent civilization, Western civilization, any sizable group of people started to work to change by insisting we can use nonviolence power to create the change. Gandhi said that nonviolent power, the power of life, is the greatest and most creative power of the universe. And that if we human beings turn away from conventional wisdom towards using the gift of life, which is ours at birth, we would be surprised what the future of the human race will look like.
You just turned 90.
I just turned 90.
You spent nearly all your life in that pursuit of equality and freedom.
Yes.
Someone might say, if you couldn't achieve this thing in 90 years, I just don't see it happening. Yeah. Do you believe that it will happen for those who have been disenfranchised, who have been oppressed by white male supremacy in the United States? Can we actually achieve that?
We're at this mark in our history because the changes to become a nation under God, where in fact justice and access for every baby is underway. And Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, represents the old order who would like to turn the clock back. But the clock is not going to be turned back. There may be great agony along the way between now and then, but the American people already have indicated that they don't want to go back to segregation, especially young people today. Mm-hmm. And if we could get young people to follow the example of Gandhi or Rosa Parks and to strategize their behavior, America says, you must do something. Well, doing something that doesn't work is the same as doing nothing. That's Gandhi. Mm-hmm. So what we did, where we strategized and we analyzed our system and tried to put together the strategic offense that would make a difference. Mm-hmm. That kind of work in activism is essential work for the next 100 years or so.
Reverend Lawson, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Right.
We certainly hope you enjoyed this. But most importantly, remember, you have to be in the game. You have to be involved in the process. You cannot sit on the sidelines. You cannot say it doesn't impact you, because every decision that is made by city councils, by school boards, by county commissioners, by water districts, by state reps, state senators, even the President of the United States has an impact on your life and the life of your children, which is why you must be woke, get woke, stay woke, and vote.
Everything that's going on right now, I think I think we have to look at this in a different way. We have to stop being angry and start recognizing that we do have this power and stepping into it.
You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back.
Hey folks, I'm Roland Martin. This is Welcome to Be Woke Vote. I'm the host of Roland Martin Unfiltered. Glad to have you with us. By 2043, America will be a nation majority people of color. And of those minority groups, Latinos will be the largest group. But will they maximize their voting power? Well, that's a concern of my next guest. She has been always focused on that issue and others as well. So welcome, Salah Haneo. What's happening?
Thanks, Roland. Hi.
For you, when did you first vote?
Oh, God. To be honest with you, first time Obama.
So 08.
Yeah.
Why didn't you vote before that? Was it just...
I'm going to be very honest with you. I came to this country when I was 4 years old from Colombia, from immigrant parents. And for a long time, even getting success in my career to me was hindered by this underlying thought that I wasn't enough or that I didn't matter because I was just an immigrant girl who came here.
So the story of America is a nation of immigrants.
But I understand that now, and that's why, look, I'm getting impassioned talking about it because I know that mindset so very well. They don't think they matter, and they don't think that people care that they vote or not, because this isn't their country, that they don't belong here, and they're being fed this same rhetoric by these people every day. There are painful moments in that mindset, and I know that there's a lot of people there right now. And that's what I wanted to come here and talk to you about and say to whoever's watching and listening that may have come here, you belong, there's a reason you're here, you matter. It pains me to know that there are people that felt like I felt so many years ago that won't go to vote. So I'm committing to spending the next couple of weeks. I'm gonna hold myself accountable. I'm going to register 10 people. I started last night, so I'm 1 down, 9 to go.
Yes, and one of the things that we've talked about is that numbers are one thing,
Right.
but how you take advantage of that is another. In Texas, 2.1 million Latinos eligible to vote, but not registered. That means they are sitting on power, but not using it.
Right. I think there's a two-part problem to this. I don't feel that they're not voting because they don't want to or because they don't care. I think they're not voting because they think they don't matter. When you get naturalized in this country and you become a citizen and you're eligible to vote, I experienced this with my mom. The first time I took her to vote was when she voted for President Obama.
2008, 2012. First time you ran. Okay, got it. Second time you ran. Okay.
Yeah. She walked around with a sense of pride that I'd never seen in her that I really loved, and I said, Mom, why was this the first time you cared to vote? And I kind of felt guilty because I didn't really impassion her to do so before. But I think that because a lot of Latino people in the country, they have this right, but they don't feel like they belong. That to me is the bigger issue. So I think everything that's going on right now, I think we have to look at this in a different way. We have to stop being angry and start recognizing that we do have this power and stepping into it. We have to try and get to young people and make them matter, especially Latinos, because like you said, we're the fastest growing demographic in the country. I myself talk to people all the time. They're like, the kids in my family that are now eligible to vote, they're like, yeah, but you know, it's just such a big task. It's so overwhelming. And I'm like, yeah, we're not changing the world in one day. We're just trying to make a small difference, and you do matter. Your vote does matter.
Well, and one of the things that I have consistently talked about in all of these different interviews is that we also have to connect the dots.
Right.
To get folks to understand it happens.
There's an action that
here.
needs to take place, right. We see the problem and we complain about it, but we stay in that place. And I think that we're entering a different era. And I think that these things are all happening for a reason. I think that they're so glaringly obvious and they're so devastating for a reason, because our collective American dream is at stake. It's not just Latinos, it's the fabric of this country that we grew to love and what we believe this country is and what other countries look to us for.
Would you also say that what you're dealing with is, so let's just compare two different groups. For Black Americans,
right.
because of slavery, because of the complete destroying of a past, there really is no direct connection to various African countries.
Right.
And so if you're from Mexico, if you're from Colombia, if you're from any other particular country, it's, yeah, I'm here, but I'm also from there. As opposed to saying, I'm Colombian.
Right. I'd had this conversation last night. I'm American Colombian. I love Colombia. I was born there. But this is the country that I love, that I call home. So this is the place that I have my allegiance to. This is who I care for, the people that I care for, my family that one day hopefully I will raise will live here. Latinos are the fastest growing demographic, and they don't think that they matter, and that to me is a sad part. And so this is probably the most important election that we've had in a long time, and I get so impassioned by it because there are so many things that have happened that if we don't see them for what they are, this is just going to continue to, get out of control. If I don't actually say, hey, I'm going to commit to registering 10 people to vote. And that's the thing, I think, is we get so hung up on the big picture. The big picture matters, but it only matters when we all do small things. That's how it happens. It's not, hey, let's just post on Twitter and post on Instagram, because yes, social media is huge, we know it, but we have to actually get out there and walk the walk.
But see, but the thing, what you just said though is, and which I believe is the one thing people are absolutely afraid of. It's accountability.
Yeah.
Because see, I can easily post it.
Yeah.
But when you say, I am going to register 10 people, that means that I am going to have to get up, and even if I'm not a registrar, I'm going to have to take folks there.
Or go online, it's just
absolutely.
Yeah.
But that means I'm going to ask the question, are you registered? If you're not, okay, we're going to register you right now. Okay, what do you mean right now? I'm real busy right now. No, we're going to do this right now.
I just did it with my best friend last night. Yeah, she was at my house and she said, I saw you posted. I said, yeah, are you registered? She's like, no, I just moved. But like I said, deadline is October 22nd. You have no time. You have to do. She's like, oh, wow. She went home. She's like, I just registered. I mean, and this is the time to do it. Aren't there 3 states that have 3 potential black governor?
Yeah, Maryland, Florida, and Georgia.
We have Latina legislature. I mean, this is a time for us to make history and to have people that share our ideals and our vision for the country and to move it forward. And if this isn't when we do it, the opportunity, and then there's no coming back from this.
There you go. So I've been doing this, everybody I talked to. You almost did it, but we're going to put you under the clock.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
I don't like this. Please don't. I'm really bad under pressure.
You'll be all right. You'll get over it. Don't worry about it.
Roland,
you'll survive.
I'm so scared.
No, you'll survive. So here's the test. You have come upon a young person. You've come upon somebody who's middle-aged or who's older. They've never voted. And you run to them, and you have 30 seconds to convince them why they must vote. What do you say in the 30 seconds?
Sir, ma'am, you must vote. Oh,
Go.
God. Okay, sir, ma'am, you must vote because everything that you grew up believing that was true about our beautiful country is at stake, because your grandchildren depend on you, because it depends on how they will grow up, their character, who they become, because... Oh, because
you're doing good.
Roland, because you matter and because you're smart and beautiful and because you belong here, sir. Because we are counting on you and our future, our kids need you. And God, I'm struggling here.
You're fine. That's 28 seconds. You did it. See? What? That was it.
That was it? Okay.
That was the message.
I got 28 seconds?
You had 2 left.
Yeah.
So you could have breathed.
I soared myself short. Okay.
Folks, give it up for Zulahaneo.
Thank you. Hi, guys. This is Zulai here with Roland. This is our country. Own it. Vote.
When you look at the quality of your life, when you look at the things you want to see happen, not just for yourself, but for your children and your children's children, do you have the courage to look in their eyes and say, I didn't have enough time. Sorry you don't have health care. Sorry you don't have a living wage. Sorry you don't have the money to go to school because I chose not to vote.
You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back.
Welcome to Be Woke Vote. I'm Roland Martin, host of Roland Martin Unfiltered. Our whole focus is to engage folks all across this country to get them to understand the power, the impact of voting, and what it means to you and your family. We had some amazing conversations with folks from all walks of life. And joining me right now is someone who gives a totally different perspective as a Hollywood insider, as a pastor, as somebody who sees the world in a whole different way. Give it up, folks, for Devon Franklin.
What's up?
Glad you're here, baby.
Good to see you.
It's interesting when we talk about Hollywood, faith, and politics.
Yeah.
Because we've always had faith involved with politics. But when you think even about our struggle, when you think about Black Freedom Movement, when you think about the role that Harry Belafonte played, and Sidney Poitier, and Diane Carroll, and James Brown, and Dick Gregory, we've always had Black folks who were in Hollywood who understood that they were not just on the big or the small screen.
That's right.
They were also Ruby Dee, I.C. Davis. I can go on and on and on. They understood we got to use this thing we got.
That's right.
To make change.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, especially now, when the stakes couldn't be higher for where we are as a country, where we are as a culture, when you have the platform in entertainment, I do believe it's important to use it, because the same people that will buy the movie ticket or stream the album or go and support the book, they're the same people. They're voting for what they want to see in entertainment. And now, to me, it's about using the platform to say, hey, it's not just about an entertainment vote, it's about a vote that actually is going to affect the very trajectory of your life.
The reality is, everybody is not going to be as active and involved as Kerry Washington or Jeffrey Wright. They're going to be those people who are going to be raising money. They're going to be those people who are going to be publicly raising money, others who are going to be privately raising money.
Yep.
But the thing for me is, you got to do something.
Yeah, no matter what it is. And I think that's also one of the challenges, is that too often we will look at others and make a judgment on what they shouldn't do. I think we all have to operate based on our convictions, right? And that conviction, especially when it comes to being politically active, is going to take a different shape in each individual relative to who they are, their platform, their background, so on and so forth. But I agree with you that we all, especially in this moment that we're living in, should feel compelled, no matter what our sphere of influence is to do something to help make this thing different.
Look what just happened with Taylor Swift.
Exactly.
So here is
Right.
Here is a young white woman from Tennessee who has look. I'm not going anywhere near politics. Everybody, we all good. We love everybody. But all of a sudden, she's like, "Hold up,
The stakes are too high."
And what got me was, and I will give her credit. She didn't just say, "Oh, hey, I just need y'all to vote." She said, "No."
She did her homework.
She said, "I'm looking at this man, the former governor of Tennessee. I'm looking at Blackburn, who's member of the House," and she's like, "I'm sorry, just because she's a woman
doesn't make
she
her."
said she's against the things that I stand for, and I'm voting for this man." And there's 100,000
New voters just from that
in like a 48-hour period.
But here's the thing: how much effort did it really take her to do that? Not much.
It was an Instagram post.
So the idea that it's really hard, it's really not. You do the post, boom, your influence will speak for itself. So I think what she has done, if you look at what Rihanna recently just did this week, and posting on her social channels about, hey, you got to get out and vote. I love what we're seeing, because it just takes one person like that to say, hey, before I wasn't gonna get involved, now I realize I have to get involved, and it becomes a snowball effect.
When I look at right now where we stand, you talk about these issues and where we are in the level of divisiveness. I do believe you have a significant number of people, especially you look at the numbers of young people. I remember the last election, 2016, the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, they released their survey where it said who is excited or who said we're absolutely going to vote. 65 plus, off the chart. They had the highest number. Literally, it went from 65 plus is where they started, and as you went from 65 plus to the next group, which was like 48 to 65, and then you went from 30 to 47 or whatever, that bad boy was dropping. And the lowest number was 18 to 29. The numbers prove it. Millennials are the largest group in America. They're now larger than baby boomers. And if you don't use your power, they will run you over.
Completely. And I think that's why what we're seeing so much, especially when you look at who's controlling the country and how the country is being controlled, it is because the powers that be and those that know how the system works are taking advantage of the system for their own interests. So part of it when it comes to this millennial generation is education. You got to understand why it's so important, understand what's really at stake. So the things that you're seeing, that they may be seeing right now that make you angry, here's how you can affect change. And what I love is that what you're seeing, what's coming out of Parkland, is these younger group, of millennials becoming much more politically savvy, much more politically activated and organized.
Right.
Organization is key. It's like, an ant by itself can't do anything, but ants working together, can do things well beyond their own capacity. And I think the same thing goes for this younger generation to become united and activized on what's happening. And what I love what you're seeing right now is that when you look at a Taylor Swift, right, or you look at a Rihanna, or you look at those like a Kerry Washington, this generation, which gets so much inspiration from entertainment, this generation is influenced. I mean, every generation has their influence.
Yep.
But I would argue, by and large, when you talk about Harry Belafonte, or you talk about, how it was, in the 60s, 70s, and even 80s, there was, you had the entertainers, you had the church, you had the activists. In our day and time, the church is somewhat losing its influence. Entertainment influence is growing. The activists are losing their influence. So where do most, this younger generation go? They go to entertainment. And so the influencers' entertainment can actually move the needle. And when you see people become active, I love how this younger group of people are saying, wait a minute, we don't like what just happened with Kavanaugh. We're going to do something about it. We don't like the fact that there's no gun control. We're going to do something about it. And I do think that as tragic as these events are, they are becoming more galvanizing to get this younger group of voters, which is so influential, to get out and do what we know they can do, which is to help move the needle in a massive way.
When a group of black pastors met with Donald Trump at the White House, it was supposedly about criminal justice reform. But in Trump's opening statements, he mentioned about 10, 12 different issues. One pastor in the meeting talked about how, Trump has done more for black people than Obama ever did. And I listened to all those different pastors as they went around that particular table. And I wrote a column afterwards where I said,
What do you say?
And I said, when you go to the White House, are you enamored with getting the invitation? Or do you bring your prophetic with you? The prophetic has to always supersede the partisan. I said, you can go through the Bible, and when individuals messed up, the prophets let them know you messed up. The prophets were not afraid of the king. They were not afraid of David. They were not afraid of any of them. And that's what offended me, that here you are a preacher, you are a pastor, you are speaking and teaching the gospel, and you're sitting there with the president. And not one had the courage to say, look, I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate coming here to talk about criminal justice reform. But Mr. President, I need to share something with you. You need to act like the president. Not one had the guts to say, Mr. President, character matters. How you behave matters. And how you behave is wrong. And we're going to pray for you. We're going to pray for there's a change in your behavior. Not one. That was the issue that I took.
Wow.
And I think by not saying that, it speaks to young people. And they were like, that's why I ain't going to church. Because you don't have the courage to say what should be said.
Yeah, when Jesus sent out the 12, he said, be wise as a serpent, be harmless as a dove. And in moments like that, and it's like when you're dealing with politics and you're dealing with different people who have different agendas, part of it is sometimes before you even get in the room or before you're going to meet with somebody, you got to do your prep. You got to say, okay, this person is working an agenda. They have a certain degree of power. They have constituents, whatever it may be.
Right.
Let me do my prep before I get in the room so that I'm prepared to handle it. Because when you're going to someone else's turf, they control the environment.
Right.
So that is one of the biggest turfs in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So part of it is like, okay, I'm being invited to whatever the situation may be. I'm being invited. Okay, let me spend some time. Let me get my team together. Let me get my talking points together. Let me get some strategy in place so that when I'm in the room, I've prepared myself to maneuver and to handle and to respond.
What would you say to a young person who says, look, I'm trying to change our society, I'm trying to change this world. Man, I ain't got time for this church stuff. I just don't think y'all legit.
Oh man, I would say just because you see an artist in music that you don't like, do you stop listening to hip hop? No, it's like ridiculous. You see one artist do something that is what their choice was, has nothing to do with the whole industry or the whole art form of hip hop. You don't throw out hip hop. So the same way, if you see an artist that you don't like do that, I would ask you, don't do the same thing with the church. Because just because you see one minister, one man or woman do something that you don't agree with, don't use that as an excuse to demonize an institution that could actually help save your life. You know, I am who I am because I was raised in the church. You know, all the things that I'm able to do in the world are directly related to being brought up in a healthy church environment where I learned how to develop my gifts. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to deal with other people. I learned how to lead. All of those things that help me and other people become successful in society, you can learn in the church. So I would say to somebody that's young, I would challenge them. Everything that's in you, if you're trying to get it out, get into a good church, because that church will be a fantastic incubator for all the gifts that are in you. And when you find the right church, you will find that the others that you may have been looking at were the wrong people to look at. In any profession, I don't care what it is, you're always going to find people that you can point out that may not represent that profession to the best of their ability. But when you find those that do, then you begin to see what it really is about. So I would encourage that young person, you know, don't give up on God. Don't give up on your relationship with the Lord. Don't say, oh, you know, Jesus is this, Jesus is that. No, try him for yourself and be persistent. Find the right environment that works for you. And I guarantee you that you would see that environment to be transformative. That's what I would say.
Our last task. So you run up against that person or somebody else, and they say, but I hear you, but bro, I ain't got time for this voting stuff. It's just not, I don't think it's worthwhile. And all you got is 37.
I would say you need to vote because at the end of the day, when you look at the quality of your life, when you look at the things you want to see happen, not just for yourself, but for your children and your children's children, if they do not happen because you chose not to exercise your vote, do you have the courage to look in their eyes and say, I didn't have enough time. Sorry you don't have health care. Sorry you don't have a living wage. Sorry you don't have the money to go to school because I chose not to vote. And if the answer is you cannot look in their eyes, then I ask you the question, how can you not vote?
That was 31, but it works.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy, Devon Franklin. Get woke, be woke, stay woke, vote.